Well, Nathan Livingston, aka MilkBar TV, thanks for coming on Based. It's purely the domain of those who are incredibly based. So you have passed the test. Congratulations! It's a great pleasure to have you on. Actually, in the very week where the Labor government have introduced the so-called combating misinformation disinformation bill, which is so terrible and so awful. I want to talk to you about that in a minute. But thanks for coming on board. And I'm really interested in the backstory to this because I read a tweet you put up like a week or two ago, I think, where you told your backstory about in 2021 being a forklift driver and getting mandated out of your job. And serendipitously, here we are. You're running one of the most interesting Twitter feeds, I think, going around. So tell us how that came about.
Yeah, so we're gonna go back to the dark days of COVID. And so I was a filmmaker. I've been an independent filmmaker, and you can't exactly pay the bills doing that, especially not in Australia. So I worked as a forklift driver and in warehouses to make a living. So I did that throughout the lockdowns in COVID. So in 2020, I was doing that, which was quite interesting. I was working in a medical warehouse. So we're literally sending out the hand sanitizers, and we had to wrap it in black wrapping so no one could see what it was because they were that afraid that it would get jacked and people would then sell it off. So interesting times. I got fired from one job because of the lockdowns. They just couldn't keep on employees. But otherwise, I worked pretty much throughout the lockdowns in Melbourne. It was strange times. I mean, the city was completely empty, so I just ride my bike straight clean through the city and go to work. But yeah, so I worked a few different jobs, and then 2021, I was working in a clothing warehouse. They did embroidery, uniforms, a whole bunch of stuff. And yeah, this leads up to October 2021, where the vaccine mandates, they slowly stage it out. So this is all in Melbourne. So they slowly kind of separate into industries, where it was the medical professionals, then it was the education, then it was the construction workers. We saw those huge CMFEU protests. And then not long after that, it was pretty much widespread. Everyone, pretty much every job. It's unbelievable now, even when you look down that list to try and find a profession that it wasn't mandated under. It's just, it keeps going and going and going. And although, it seemed that it was safe for me to work as a forklift driver in a warehouse throughout COVID when it was kind of the most dangerous, when the vaccines came, they said that it was necessary for me to have one to keep my job. And, I pretty much decided, I decided I was young and healthy, so I decided that it wasn't a requirement. By this time, we knew pretty well the dangers of COVID and who was hit hardest by it. And me in my age bracket with my health, I seemed perfectly fine. I wasn't scared of catching COVID, and so I thought it was unnecessary for me to have the COVID jab. But most of all, it was the principle for me where I felt that the government shouldn't be able to mandate what you put inside your body. And I thought that was kind of, if they crossed that line, there was no line left. So I decided, what, I'm going to stand on my principles, and let's see what happens. And yeah, I lost my job, and it's been a bit of an adventure ever since then.
Yeah. And it's funny because I was thinking as you were talking there, that Melbourne, having had that experience with those enormous world-leading lockdowns, if you like, have now become almost the epicenter of some of the social media in this country, haven't they? People like Rukshan and Avi Yamini and Topher Field and these sorts of people, yourself, obviously, almost came out of that time. Is there a sort of a growing subculture of social media people that are kind of, it seems like it, that are burgeoning in Victoria at the moment?
Yeah, definitely. I was quite late to the party. I'd never really used social media, and in fact, I didn't go to any of the lockdown protests. I wouldn't have called myself a particularly political person. I'd never been to any protests really. And I was always against lockdowns on principle. I just didn't believe the government should have the power to be able to close down a business or to tell you weren't able to go to your family's funeral. I just thought that was way too much power for the government. But I wasn't out on the streets like Topher or Avi reporting on them. I'd post the odd thing on Facebook, but that was about it. So it wasn't until I lost my job And it really kind of came to my doorstep that I actually became political and outspoken. So that was October 2021. And yeah, I started MilkBar TV and I went to every single protest from then on and recorded all of them. But yeah, I mean, there's this kind of little subculture of independent media that's kind of ridden this new wave with social media, and it's why it's so important for people to be able to have these platforms. And I think it's important to remember, even back then, how hard it was to actually speak out on many of these issues, including masks and lockdowns, and especially the COVID vaccines and vaccine injuries. You know, I lost my first account, and many people were shadow banned, and so it's good to see now that there's at least X as a platform where that's welcome. But it's very important, especially as you touched on this week with this new legislation, that you remember how hard it was back then. It was really, it was very, very hard. You know, one of the few places you could actually get to the truth was in comment sections under articles and things. That's the only place. It was, otherwise they just kind of blocked it openly.
It was a complete lockdown, wasn't it? I mean, it's sort of a bit of a metaphor, I think, for the media landscape prior to the internet, and it was always hailed, the internet, as being this great, the vanguard of libertarian thought and free speech, and and it was projected out there. And I think the establishment, particularly in the United States, loved that because they thought they were going to project their message into the sort of the authoritarian world. And it seems like it's come full circle now, and the establishment has become quite authoritarian about it. There were only a handful of number of ways to get a message out. They were through print media, radio, TV, and a dribble of others. But they had the establishment had a pretty tight control on it until social media, and it feels like it's kind of made the establishment flip out. Your account, I think, is probably the great example of that. And I used the example the other day to someone I was talking to about your Trump video, of course, with the assassination attempt in Butler, which was about 3 or 4 minutes of where you have pieced together various camera angles, maybe 4, 5, 6 of them, and on a time clock, just to demonstrate the issue of how long it took for someone to react, for anyone to react, for the authorities to react. And that went round the world. I mean, it was featured on shows all over the United States, all over the world, had probably tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of views. But it happened from a bloke in Australia in his back room on his computer. Nothing could highlight the importance of social media more than that to me. It's world changing. No one else had done it. Tell us about that video to start off with. Like how the idea came to you and you pieced through it. How does that actually work? Because for me to organize my thoughts to get an edited video like that seems like a very difficult task, but you made it look so easy.
Yeah, you just kind of put the pieces together. Yeah, there was this question of what was the timing. I mean, how long did they know that there was this shooter up on the roof um, before he took the shot, and how fast did it take for them to actually react to him? And so there was more and more footage slowly leaking out, and there was plenty of footage of Trump being shot because the cameras were there, but there wasn't much about the crowd actually knowing about the shooter. There were several people who gave testimony on the day saying that they were aware and they tried to alert the authority. And so that was already kind of crazy. It's like, well, how do these people alert authority, yet they allowed Trump to still remain on stage? And how much time was there actually from them being aware, people in the crowd, to then Trump getting shot? So then there was a bit of footage that came out where people were literally like yelling, he's on the roof, and you could hear them calling out to authority. So the authorities there on the ground. And I could hear over the top Trump's speech echoing in the distance. So I just thought, out of my own curiosity, I want to get his full speech and then be able to line it up to hear where that is in context of them alerting authorities, to then how long it was in time before he then got shot. And it turns out it was about 2 minutes long. But it was incredible. Like, even there's a few of those times where I've done that, and you get that feeling of like you're the kind of first person to kind of put that together. And I remember even getting my wife just to be like, look at this, it's like 2 minutes. And I think that's the power of social media as well. That you can have that open networking where people can upload things and then someone else can grab that and be like, that's really interesting, I'm going to add to that. And then you're able to put together something. So that's unique as well. But what's also unique is I can put out a video that's 4 minutes long and people can experience that in real time So you get that actual sensation of the time passing, and you're just wondering what's Secret Service doing? Why is it taking so long? And that's impactful. Corporate media can't do that. They can't just play a video for 4 minutes and let the audience at home watch. They got ad breaks. They're worried about people turning. But social media, you're able to do that, and people are able to share that. So it's incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I mean, it does beg the question why, with all of those media resources, nobody did it. Nobody literally from the mainstream media anywhere in the world did it. I think, I'm not sure, but I hadn't seen anyone do it before you. I think you were the first person in the world to do it, to piece that together. I mean, that's actually, like, without putting too fine a point on it, that's actually an incredible moment in history, really. I mean, if somebody was the first person to find the footage of JFK getting shot or something like that, that would be, kind of, I don't know, historical, I think. And you did it. You did it there, probably where you're sitting right now on your computer. It just highlights for me the point of perhaps why there are some that are so scared of social media and the narrative. And how far around, do you know anything about the views? I mean, you'd never know because it was out in the wild, so you'd never know how many views it got. But I mean, it was referred to on, I think, Jimmy Dawes' show. I think you went all the way through to when Sky News Australia did it. I think Liz Wheeler, you've been talked about by Michael Knowles, Ben Shapiro. I think even Elon Musk referred to it at one point, didn't he? So,
Yeah, the crazy
I
thing
mean,
with that one is that it made it on the record to the House Judiciary Committee into the investigation.
that's
So I
right.
mean that's crazy if it gets to Congress. That's quite
It's
insane.
unreal. And I mean, are you aware of, I mean, any idea about the numbers of views?
No, on that post that I did, it was 12 million, but I've seen other people who've shared it that have larger ones. But one of the other times, I mean, related back to COVID, probably the first big one. It was a similar thing and a similar feeling that I had, where it was all about the COVID vaccines and how they supposedly stop transmission. Um, I was the first person, I believe, at least by how the video was received, to actually really piece together that there was all these people, including people in power, who all claimed that the vaccines stop transmission. And then I was able to realize by this time, by July 2022, that a lot of these people had then actually caught COVID themselves. So what I was able to do was then just put back to back all of these people in power, bureaucrats, politicians saying, take the vaccine, you won't catch COVID, and then cut to them all, putting out press release statements or saying themselves that they'd caught COVID. And so that video was a similar kind of thing where it was just this, it was by that time was kind of this awareness of like, oh, see, these COVID vaccines aren't stopping transmission. Mandates are still in place. And here, even these people who are still kind of preaching this themselves have now caught COVID. So that was a similar thing. That was probably the first really huge one where it got sent worldwide, and I was really proud because even Rand Paul quote tweeted and said like, this one's for you, Fauci. So that was kind of one of those big ones where it was very surreal. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right, to be kind of sat in my like little spare room with my little computers and to be putting these things out and for them to be getting seen and spread like that. It's unreal.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to chat to you today, because the timing with the misinformation bill is kind of serendipitous, as I said, but because we didn't know that when we organised to do this, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But it just, what you're doing does highlight very clearly, I think, the power of social media and the deficiencies of the mainstream media. Frankly, I mean, I feel increasingly like, whether by design or something else, the mainstream media just either aren't doing this work, don't have the time, the resources, in the sense of they want to get things out, they've got to be first up and so on. So the ability for someone like you to have a bit more time, just kind of sit down and do it properly, and with a bit of freedom to do that, with no editorial constraints, is the point, isn't it? I mean, it's why this has become so effective and perhaps so frightening for those who sit in the establishment, in the corporate media, politics, and government. It's a very effective tool.
It's strange to think back to 3 years ago and what it was like actually putting out videos, because it did feel dangerous in that respect, in that you could have your account taken down. And but also, it wasn't that far after that people were getting knocks on the doors and literally arrested for posting on Facebook, protests that they wanted to put on. So I think that's where it's important to, as we talk about this misinformation bill, to look back and think, yeah, do we really want to go back to those days? Um, I certainly don't. I think most of the people don't. I remember I started doing more satirical videos. That's how MilkBar TV started. It was doing more kind of meme type things. So I did a lot of like film spoofs, and it was crazy. Like satire then felt genuinely dangerous because it felt like it wasn't allowed. And we actually know. I mean, you found that out yourselves with your FOI, looking at the Department of Home Affairs, that there was literal memes like satire being taken down by the government. So yeah, we're in a very vulnerable, fragile place, and so I think it's important to really think about where this could lead.
Yeah, and so this week, the Labor government have introduced this so-called combating misinformation and disinformation bill. It had been sitting on the shelf for a while. It had been an exposure draft, so they had an original version of it, which was just absolutely terrible. They've now gone back, they say, consulted and released a new version of it, and they've actually introduced that into the House of Reps. So, it's going to be debated probably before the end of the year, certainly before the end of the year. And They say it's better, but it's, in my view, I've read it yesterday, and I'll read it again just to get on top of the minute detail. But effectively, for people that are watching, what it'll do is give the regulatory body, ACMA, the ability to sanction people who put things up on social media companies, smaller ones, for what they call misinformation, which has a particular definition. It's all to do with something which might be seen to harm either the health of Australians, the financial position of Australians, the well-being, whatever that may be, is this broad language. It's got to be serious harm, but that comes with its own definition. All of this is open to interpretation, and the interpretation will be done by the courts and by the independent authorities. So it really is, I think, a clamp, sort of a foothold on free speech. And the kicker is this: it doesn't apply to the mainstream media. It doesn't apply to the normal newspapers and to anyone the government exempts. So that'll be government departments, who are and have been some of the biggest purveyors of misinformation in the last 3 or 4 years themselves. And in fact, just on the subject, I feel like I'm doing the podcast now, but I get quite worked up about this. The government, in their information they put out yesterday, actually cite as an example of misinformation the supposed time Donald Trump said you should inject bleach to cure COVID, which of course has been widely debunked. He never actually said that. So the alluding to that in itself is misinformation. The irony is thick. I mean, from your point of view as a kind of a independent content creator, I mean, this is going to become a problem if it passes, isn't it?
Yeah, even my account. I mean, like you said, my first account. Like I said, my first account got nuked back in early 2022. And I've only really seen my account explode since Elon Musk bought X, and since he really kind of freed up what you could say and got rid of a lot of that terrible kind of coding that clamped down on things. And since then it's grown more and more. I don't know. That's the thing. Who determines misinformation? And the government, like you said, the government are one of the biggest purveyors, and they don't seem to have to answer for what they get wrong. And I know, like we started talking about COVID, we might as well bring it back to COVID. I mean, yeah, I lived through the longest lockdowns in the world, and no one's had to even answer for that. I think there's legitimate discussion to be had specifically about Australia, and about our, I'd say, overreaction to COVID and the damage that did. I think it was disproportionate, but I think we can have a legitimate conversation about that, and I think it warrants it. But yet, you even seeing politicians coming out saying that you're a conspiracy and a cooker to even suggest that there needs to be some sort of a royal commission. I think the general public would say that they weren't happy with how the government handled the pandemic, and there was a lot of things that they did wrong. But yet the government's not having to account for that. It's the double standard. We live in a democracy. I mean, surely there needs to be faith in the people and the citizens to be able to voice what they feel, and more it seems like the government's terrified of the people and attempting to silence them.
Yeah, well, I mean, the internet and social media, as it plays out, is a great tool for populist movements, isn't it? I mean, it's been shown to be that all across the world. In fact, President Trump was elected really on the back of the Twitter before they kind of shut him down in the first run, and that was almost the thing that got him elected. Really, the use of social media, and probably the same with Brexit, and of course many other examples around the world over the last few years. It's so important to populist movements and such a threat to political establishments and political orthodoxy that it seems to have taken this approach. But look, I think we've got a lot of work to do on that. And then that's why it's so good to talk to you about the work you're doing, because it does actually highlight how powerful one person can be inside the kind of the political discussion with this sort of stuff. I mean, there are a couple of others. I mean, you I think have done a couple of effective videos across the course that in relation to other issues. You've been quite outspoken, of course, about COVID. How is it you've sort of developed this kind of interest in this style? Was it just the COVID experience that got you into the political sphere, or has it always been something you've been interested in?
No, I was making horror films before before COVID hit. I was making short films. I went to film school. I spent my 20s kind of working in hospitality and, wasting a lot of time. And then I decided I'd kind of get my ass into gear. And just as I did, COVID hit. And so, yeah, I'd never really used social media. And I never really had the urge to make political films or videos. It was purely just a cathartic release. I mean, it was illegal for me to work. I couldn't work because I was unvaccinated. So I had a lot of spare time on my hands, and I had this kind of skill set that I built up in being able to edit. So I just started kind of pointing it in the direction of what I was seeing is just this kind of corruption and madness and hypocrisy. So that's how it started, and just people received them well. So I just kept going from there. So I don't know. I mean, people find that inspiring, in that I somehow they attempted to kind of punish me for that decision, and somehow I've kind of built up more and more of a profile, and now I'm even working for politicians, and I'm now kind of like aiming at them, at the people that kind of cost me my job.
And I'm interested in the sort of the social media landscape, because it really was well, the social media world at that point felt like like walking through the minefield, didn't it? And you said you lost an account. You had one banned, I think, on the original Twitter before Musk. But how have you found that? Like, how have you found the difference between negotiating your message on things like YouTube compared to X? I don't know if you use Rumble or any of the others as well, but I mean, obviously the heat is off now, so some of these companies are perhaps less interested in what's being said. But X has been, and the Elon Musk version of X, which gets a lot of criticism in the political world, I think has been a very positive thing, frankly, and that must be the case from where you sit as well.
Yeah, I don't use Facebook. I stopped using Facebook years ago. It was just pointless. Instagram, I stopped using for a while again because it got no traction and I got banned. YouTube, I just kept getting strikes and I tried to get monetized. YouTube was interesting. They took off immediately. They got huge numbers, and then straight away you could feel the shadow banning. And then not long after that, there was a couple strikes, and I tried multiple times to get monetized, and it just won't happen. And yeah, Twitter first account suspended, started another one. MilkBar TV was my third account. And I've just I like Twitter, I like X just because it's a great way to be able to engage with people. Like I said, I'm not actually that savvy when it comes to social media. I didn't really use social media much before then, so I've just got good at using X. So that's kind of my main point at this place. But yeah, Instagram kind of is starting to open up a little bit better. I think I'm not sure what that is. Maybe because there's more time has passed, so you can approach things like COVID, some other issues. But yeah, I've jumped around from COVID to kind of the radical gender ideology, to a little bit to do with climate change. Yeah, so for me, it's just Twitter at the moment, and Twitter's got its downsides. There's certainly is misinformation there, and there's certainly accounts that grow big off misinformation. They do have community notes, which I think is a really great way to combat that, where people are able to vote on posts, and there's a selected amount of people that then can actually vote to say, no, this is based on this kind of evidence. This is wrong. This is kind of fake news, and then it'll put up something that you can read. I feel like it's a responsibility of people on these social media landscapes to call out people that are spreading misinformation and people that are getting big off it and don't have a regard for the truth. Because I do feel that heat of the government. So I think it's on us to within these communities to actually call out these people and to not amplify these accounts and these posts.
Yeah, it's become an interesting place. Twitter is clearly, or the new X has clearly ruffled some feathers in amongst the various governments all around the world. And I mean, we all agree. I think keeping kids safe, sure, no argument from me. But how do you do that without censoring free speech as well? That is the $1 million question. I don't think anyone's got to grips with it yet because this proposal to stop kids from using social media entirely up until whatever the age ends up being, 16 or 14 or whatever it might be, seems like a good idea to many people. But of course, the devil's in the detail. And it's like Ronald Reagan said, I'm here from the government. I'm from the government and I'm here to help. Well, I just want the government out of my life as much as possible, frankly. And it sort of seems to apply to the social media world where there are those platforms like X that are open with the dialogue. They seem to get concerned. So it's going to be an interesting time over the next few months before Christmas. We've got a lot of work to do in order to push back on some of these bills. But wanted to thank you for the work you've been doing, and it's been really interesting having a chat to you today on Based, and keep up the great work. I'll look forward to seeing one of your videos popping around somewhere in the world media. Who knows where they'll pop up, but it's great work, and I hope you keep it up.
Well, thank you. I've used you in quite a few of them, so it's always surreal when I then kind of like engage and speak with the people in real life. So no, I'm a big fan of what you're doing. So right back at you.
That's very kind. That's very kind. Good on you, Nathan. Thanks for that. Keep up the good work, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thanks, Alex.